says record, transcript, Q&A. And if you're here for Open the Door, talking with fathers who want to change their coercive, controlling, and abusive behaviors, you're in the right place. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping up front, and then we're going to introduce you to the trainers and get started. Whoops, sorry. Sorry, everybody, going the wrong way. Here we go. We're going to talk about interpretation. So for all of us, we're going to need to pick, thank you for that heart that flew up at me, appreciate that. We're going to ask everyone to find that little globe or circle at the bottom of your screen and pick the language you'd like to hear. So we know there's some folks who prefer Spanish today, and even if you're an English speaker, monolingual English speaker, please pick English so we can all be in the conversation together. And here's the same instructions again in Spanish. Good morning. I see we have 80. We see a few more people coming in with us. So if you're just joining us, even if you're an English speaker, can you please find that little interpretation globe circle at the bottom of your screen and select English? And if you would like Spanish, please select Spanish. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about technology. If you need any help this morning with technology or you get kicked out, can you please email Mo at Whiskative, and Mo can help you. And remember, we're using Zoom today. If you want to use auto captioning, and we're in a webinar format, if you look at the menu on the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to see a place where you can click on show captions. If you want to change your name, if you hover in the corner of the picture of yourself, you'll see like 3 little dots, and you click rename, and you can name yourself whatever feels right today on Friday. Okay. And I want to talk a minute about training certificates. If you're sharing a screen, please send me an email after this training with your first and last name and tell me you attended the screening but shared a screen so we can make sure you get a certificate. We need this because Zoom can't tell us when people are sharing screens. But if you don't care, don't do it. Okay. Before I introduce you to the trainers, I just want to take a moment and talk a little bit about what this training this experience preparing for this Open the Door training has meant to all of us at the Coalition. All of us feel that this training is a special moment to call all of us into community with dignity and humanity. As a lifelong advocate, I expanded my understanding of the power of conversations over time with trust and insight that home visitors, all of you, demonstrate when you engage with the whole family. How do we all help create the communities we want to live in, to love in, to raise children in? We believe these kinds of conversations help us imagine what we mean to each other and for each other, even in challenging moments. This conversation is beginning. This is an open door to continue conversations wherever you work, in rural, remote, urban settings, and all kinds of housing settings, apartment buildings, family homes, trailers, camping sites, wherever your heart and support for families take you. And so we want to thank you for spending the time with us today. And I just personally want to thank all the home visitors I've learned from over these before COVID lockdown and through and continuing these past few years. So now I'm going to introduce you to our trainers. I want to just first name, these trainers are also authors of this tool you're going to go over, and I just wanted to name the authors who are not with us today before I introduce the trainer authors who are. So Sorrel Hoover Rodriguez from Aiken Family, Child and Family Specialist, Amber Oldham from Lydia Place, Parents as Teachers, Jennifer Hooper, Lydia Place, Program Manager, and Luce Monroe from Catholic Charities, Parents as Teachers. So again, we're grateful to those authors as well that helped get us to this place. So now I'm just going to go around our screen. Florida Steele.
Welcome, everyone, and we appreciate you spending your time with us today.
Marcella Taylor,
Happy Friday, and thank you for choosing to spend some time with us this sunny Friday.
and Jamie Bess.
Good morning, everyone. So glad you were able to join us today.
So we are grateful and inspired by the wisdom and the experiences that these home visitors have had in creating this tool. I just want to remind you all that we also want to take a moment and acknowledge and honor that survivors are usually among us when we get more 4 people in a room, and we know that violence can happen in all kinds of relationships. We ask you to hold your questions until the end. Please write them down or put them in the chat, and I'll be watching that at the end of the training, and we can pose that to our trainer authors today. We will send out the materials after the training with some additional information, handout, resources for fathers. And now the last thing we're going to do before I turn the training over is pick our slides. So you should see at the very top of your screen a little tab that says English Lee's screen or Spanish Jesse's screen. So go ahead and click on the slides that you would like to see. So if you would like to see the training in English or Spanish, and our interpreters will still be with us. So we're going to give you all a few moments to do that, and I'm going to look in the chat to see if anybody is saying help. Okay, I for some reason can't get the everyone in my chat, but Mo, how's it looking? Everyone
Good.
there?
Yeah, good so far. I don't see anything yet from folks who aren't able to access.
Okay, great. So Mo, it's not letting me see, it's only letting me see hosts and panelists in my chat. Okay, there it goes. Now I got everybody. Okay, all right. So glad that everyone has the slides they prefer to see. And now we're going to actually officially begin this training with the really good stuff. You're going to love hearing from these women. And I'm going to turn this over to Marcella right now.
Thank you, Lee. We're going to start by talking about the language that you're going to hear us use and what you're going to see on the screen. We're going to build a shared understanding of what we mean when we talk about coercion, controlling, and abusive behaviors. Excuse me. So what we're talking about is isolation from friends, family, and accessing resources, whatever the resources are. We're talking about monitoring daily life through, it could be through the children as well. We're talking about emotional manipulation. So perhaps someone is making threats, undermining parenting, and making the survivor or the parent question their decisions. It could be physical or sexual abuse as well. On the other side, physical abuse may not even be a part of it. Threats are the way that the person causing harm is getting what they want. The most important thing to remember is that there are consequences for resisting or not doing what is expected. So examples could include talking over the survivor. We're talking about putting the survivor down. They can be hurtful. And also there's a level of harshness that we're witnessing or that we're hearing about. When we talk about a survivor, we are talking about the person who is on the receiving end of the harmful behavior. So the behaviors I just mentioned. This person may not use language or identify as a victim or even as being abused. Throughout the tool, we say survivor for the person who is the target of the harmful behavior. As you know, in the description of this session, we talked about how this is for the experienced home visitor. So we're going to talk about what we're talking about when we say the experienced home visitor in the context of today's session. We're talking about someone who has extensive experience supporting families across cultures, identities, and life experiences. This is the person who understands cultural competence and humility. You're aware of strengths and biases, and you actively participate in reflective supervision, and you continue to build your knowledge base around best practices in the home visiting field. Generally, what's the benefit to having a father participate in home visits? That may be a question that you have right now, considering what we're talking about. And there are two main reasons. One is inclusivity. Invite the father in, be inclusive. And then another one is that the father seeing his behavior in his child through the home visiting lens can cause a shift, or at least some reflection. So please be mindful that you have to take time to process what's happening in this conversations too, as the home visitor. So I'm going to pass it to Jamie, who's going to talk more about the tool.
Thank you,
Next slide.
Marcella. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how this tool came to be. And we really want to, again, reiterate that this is coming from experienced home visitors who recognized this relationship dynamic with families they were supporting. They were able to identify that there was a controlling aspect or coercion was happening, and they could see that there were unhealthy relationship behaviors, but they were also able to hold this family without judgment. And they wanted to find more ways to actually engage with this family around healthy relationships. And so the questions that, home visitors and domestic violence advocates were asking were really like, how can we engage fathers or respond to fathers who say that they want to be a different parent, or they're open to talking about their relationships and are thinking about what they could do differently? And we want to recognize that home visiting offers such a unique opportunity to open the door and have conversations and engage in conversations with fathers. So we're talking about coercive and abusive behaviors. We're talking about home visitors who are witnessing these behaviors or hearing about them from the family that they're working with. And it's really important for us as home visitors to remember that we're working with people who may never identify as a survivor. That might not be their identity, or they might not see themselves as experiencing abuse, but we are still able to see an unhealthy behavior dynamic, or maybe they see it and name it, but they would never identify as a survivor of abuse. So we really want to focus on engaging in this conversation with families where it would be best received and there's an openness. So as we're walking further through the tool and the slides, please keep in mind that we're talking about a father who is not a threat, who's not going to retaliate, but who is still engaging in behaviors that are harmful and coercive. And we are always centering the safety of the survivor throughout every step of the conversation. And this is really only a first step. This is not a full process. It's just a way to really start thinking about what engaging in these conversations can look like. And the goal is really to create a space of invitation for the father. And we know these conversations don't happen all at once. They will continue, and we hope that you as home visitors will continue to work with these families and know that conversations will be dependent on the trust and the space and the time that you have working with the family. And I'm going to pass it back to Marcella.
Thank you, Jamie. A couple of other considerations, or just maybe a little bit of framing to think about what we're also going to continue to talk about. There are many pathways to opening the door. So some paths are clear, some are winding. And when you get there, not everybody's door is the same. Each door may be different, but the opportunity to open it is there. Whether a survivor discloses directly to you or you get a sense that something is going on, that's a consideration. Another one is, sometimes the survivor will ask you, if you will talk to their partner or the father is present and the conversation just it happens organically. It happens during the course of the home visit. It happens as the father is witnessing the home visit. Or sometimes the father will see something and say, I had no idea I was engaged in my my child's development, and showing me how to pour into my child. If someone did that for me, what a difference that could have made. And I've actually had that experience a couple times being a home visitor working with fathers. At the end of the day, the entire point is to take advantage of the opportunity when the door is open. So we're going to hear from Jamie again. Here you go.
Okay, so let's talk about who this tool is for. As we have said before, this is a tool for experienced home visitors who are looking to engage with a family when a survivor has requested support and fathers have expressed wanting support with a healthier relationship or with parenting strategies. And we know the ask from fathers isn't always a direct ask for help. It could be in reaction to an activity that comes up in play. It could just be curiosity. And it could be something that, is related to what their child did or what their child didn't do or how they act when they're upset. And the home visitor themselves, we may not ever hear the father ask. It might come from the survivor who's saying, he loves his kids, he's really trying, he's really stressed out, but, the ask is embedded in that conversation. So home visitors will really need to take time and make sure that it's the right opportunity to engage in any conversation with the father. So how are we going to use this tool? We will use this tool to reflect on strategies that can open up opportunities for reflection and that will create an environment for open communication around parenting and healthy relationships. We really want you as the home visitor to get more comfortable with talking about healthy relationships and what that looks like in your home visits where coercion may be taking place. There's really no need to force or rush these conversations. And remember that as we're going through this tool, these conversations need to be survivor led. And I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. So as we talk about this, please remember that this tool is exactly that. It's a tool, right? It's a roadmap with prompts, with questions you can ask, ways to start the conversation, and also be mindful of the fact that it's not a checklist. So this is not something that you want to have in front of you with a pen, kind of making check marks, right? It's part of a conversation. You'll get prompts to start the conversation and to build the conversation. So the hope is that this also aligns. You can align it to what the conversations you're already having in some cases about healthy relationships. And it's not a complete list. So we're giving you some ideas now, and of course, you're going to add to it with your expertise. So you can remember also that the tool is flexible. It's not set in stone, and there's not really one way to move. So you have flexibility in the tool as well. As an experienced home visitor, you do this all the time. You're doing this already. You're already following the family's cues. You're being aware of the environment. You're staying present and adjusting when necessary. So this is something that you do already as a home visitor. We're going to hear from Florida next.
Thank you. What's really important is to remember that your relationship is key. If the survivor shares with you, the home visitor, that their partner wants help, this tool can help prepare the home visitor to enter into the conversations or be ready to respond if the question comes up from a father, where is help for me? At some point, someone has to say they want help. They want good relationships. They want to be a better person, and they want to stay together. There are many opportunities for people to engage and change, And there are resources and tools to help people who want to change. And we'll be sharing some of that information with you guys later. The goal is to plant a seed for future growth and moving towards a healthier relationship. This tool is not for home visitors to use without permission from the survivor. It is not a tool for home visitors to use as joint counseling or clinical or therapeutic responses. It is not for imposing your hopes and your feelings for families, even if you think that you have all the answers and you're right. We are not here to save families. We are here to work with them. It is not in use a place of therapy or clinical support, especially if you're not a licensed therapist and in your home visiting scope. Additional things to be aware of. Yes, things are complicated in coercive and abusive relationship, but things are also complicated in healthy relationships. So they are definitely complicated when relationship of coercion and controlling behaviors are taking place. The survivor might say, things are hard. I worry about my partner's response if you are to help. We are going through tough times. Take that information in, but remember that you do not engage any further unless someone has requested you to. They have asked for your support. And I will pass it on to Marcella.
Thank you. Okay, so when you witness controlling and coercive behavior, but it's not a one-time incident, it's the overall pattern of abuse. So again, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about today. So some examples include watching and listening for behavioral changes when the survivor's around. You may hear about isolation, monitoring, undermining, consequences for resistance. So some of the things I mentioned just a little bit earlier. The conversation about harm and coercion looks different when one person has power over another person versus acting in ways that they don't feel good about within the relationship. So someone may say, I can say no and there are no consequences. That's a different situation than the one that we're talking about. There are consequences for saying no. Survivors can use violence or abuse towards their partner and still not have the power or control in the relationship. And that looks like not having access to money, not having access to the car, threats about children being taken away. So also be aware of the manipulation of you yourself, the home visitor. So the person, in this case, we're talking about fathers, the father who is coercive or controlling, their manipulative behaviors are something to be concerned or something to be aware of when you're interacting as well. Just something to keep filed in the back of your mind. When you talk about the father, or what you talk about with the father may not be accurately shared back with the survivor. So it's really important to stay focused on the stated goal of your conversation. Definitely use I statements and speak from your perspective and not the perspective of the other person. So you're being very clear to make sure that you're saying, I am saying this. Even if it's unintended, you don't want to be a tool that can be used against the survivor. So also a reminder that sharing that abuse and coercion is happening is not an automatic mandatory report to CPS unless it's happening directly to the child. So exposure, witnessing, and hearing, those are not automatic CPS reports. The person may also feel safe enough to share something with you. Also knowing that the disclosure is not going to result in a CPS call. So we're talking about the importance of that relationship, right? And maintaining that relationship as well. The person also has to feel emotionally or psychologically safe to share with you, which totally depends, again, on the relationship. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so here we are at the table of contents. So follow along as we walk through the father engagement tool. So here we go. The table of contents here, this is your visual roadmap to the tool. If you're interested in receiving a copy of the Father Engagement Tool, there will be a PDF of the tool on the WSKDIV website in the near future in English and in Spanish. We'll send the link, the website link, to everyone who has attended this webinar when it's up on the website, so you'll receive notification. Additionally, we will have printed copies of the tool in a 5 by 7 inch set of cards on a ring that you can flip through, again, in English and Spanish if you're interested. So stay tuned, because at the end of this webinar, we'll drop a link in the chat with a brief form for you to fill out. Really, it only takes 30 seconds if you want us to mail you a hard copy of the tool in both English and Spanish. Next slide. Okay, so here we are at before. You see, these are some things to think about, or the steps that we're going to talk about in this pre-section. So we know that some home visitors will need some level of preparation, right, for the conversation. So let's talk you through what you need before you starting the conversation. So as you can see, we have the 4 components here on the screen that make up our before section, and we're going to go through each one. Get ready, pause, gather, and assess. So the intent for this is to have some thoughts before, to do some reflection before you even have the conversation. And think of it as pre-work, if you will, because we're not going to jump into it just yet. We're going to do some thinking about it. So next slide, and then Jamie will talk to us about getting ready.
Okay, so we're really talking about the home visitor, you, the home visitor, taking time to think about what it is that you need to be ready for this conversation. So, really specifically, as an individual, what do you need? Are you in a place emotionally to embark on this conversation? And if you do you have the personal support that you need? Is that something that you have within your organization, outside? Think about who you can talk to ahead of time and when you'll actually debrief the conversation. Really set up an intentional time to have a debrief, a pre-conversation and a debrief conversation. And you'll want to consider how long you've been working with the family. Have you built up a level of trust where you're in a space to embark on a conversation like this with the family? And you don't want to rupture your home visiting relationship. So are you at a place where you can have a conversation like this comfortably with the family? And consider your reflections with a trusted supervisor or a peer around what comes up with this family, right? We are always focused on the importance of reflective supervision and reflective practice. And it's really important to get feedback from someone you trust before you embark on this conversation. Think about what you would need to consider for the family that would be in place that would be helpful when you have this conversation. Are there any particular resources that you need to search for or provide? Are there any known stressors that are coming up for this family that are a focal point that you already know? And the real question is, how will you know that you're actually ready to approach a conversation with the family that you're working with? And I will pass it to Florida and we can chat more about that.
Thank you. It's like, how do you determine if you are the best person for the conversation? We must remember life happens with all of us. So, self reflection to ensure that you're not bringing your own stuff into the situation is really a moment to pause and reflect on how you want to move forward. Allow yourself as a home visitor to do personal reflection. Address what's coming up for you beforehand. Or is there anything that's triggering you with that, and how you want to deal with that yourself? It is our nature as home visitors to be advocates and want to share your advice, previous examples, past experiences you may have witnessed. But we must remember, in these opportunities, will that open the door or close it? Will it close off conversation? Every situation and every response can be different. Know your comfort level. How comfortable are you having these conversations? Never disregard your own feelings to support someone else. You can make the conversation difficult by trying too hard. You can be empathetic and collaborative, but how will you deal with something that comes up that triggers you? Who do you have to turn to? How do you prepare for something unexpected? Think about yourself as part of a team with a survivor and father, supporting without judgment because it is a delicate situation. Respect their journey. This is their journey and not yours. I'll pass it to Marcella.
Okay, so we've talked about you as the home visitor getting prepared. Now let's talk about the preparation with the survivor and determining if everything is in place for the conversation to move forward. So remember, the survivor is always the expert on their relationship and the safety of their family. Whatever conversations happen, they absolutely need to be okay with the survivor. Understand your role as a home visitor, that's key. So you're following the responsibilities of your agency and your program model. Again, remember that you're not a therapist, and this isn't every conversation during the visit. So this conversation is not going to take place at every single visit. It's going to take place in the situations that we're talking about. We understand that these conversations can open up opportunities for reflection, which is always one of the goals. And in the best case scenario, you're creating an environment with open communication about parenting and healthy relationships. This is the point where you're gathering your tools in preparation for the conversation with the survivor. Essentially, you're looking ahead. You're thinking about what's going to happen in the near future, hopefully. You're considering the needs that may come up for the family. You're gathering referral resources, and you're networking ahead of time to build these resources if you don't already have them in place. So that you can have the relationships and the people in place for easier navigation for the family. Because you're an experienced home visitor, you're also anticipating what the potential resources, what these needs will be. You've been visiting the family, so you have relationship with them, you have some information. So you're thinking about those things also. It's important to know your plan for your own safety and well-being as you engage in the conversation with the survivor as well. Next slide, and we're going to go back to Florida.
Pause and remember, survivors know their families best. It's very important to pause and remember to start with safety and trust. Before moving forward, remember to pause and make sure the survivor wants to proceed. Do you have a mini safety plan in process? As we know, each day is a different day, and we have to be open to pivot to what's best for the survivor, what they want, which means pause. It's always okay to go back and ask questions again. Don't force a conversation. If the opportunity comes up, revisit, but never force it. No harm is caused by pausing. You can always move forward at a later date. We'll go to Jamie.
Thank you, Florida. So you really want to allow space and time for the survivor to process with you. And you might go in thinking that one thing is going to happen. You're planning for this conversation. And then what unfolds when you're having a conversation with the survivor means that you are going to shift and do something different, and that's okay. For example, after listening to the survivor, you might decide it's a better fit to provide a resource directly to her, and she'll share that with her partner rather than you deciding to engage with the father in a conversation at this time. Please remember to be flexible and open to changes as you and the survivor consider the conversation together. And take your time. You're listening to understand, not to respond. So, as you're listening for and understanding what the survivor's priorities are and what they're most worried about, that will help you as the home visitor understand their decisions and especially what decisions they've made for their children. And if the survivor has any hesitation at all, do not go forward with the conversation. It's okay to pause and to do something different. Then let's say you've had this conversation, you've checked in, and the survivor is very clear that she would like you to go forward with the conversation, then it's important for us to continue the conversation and gather the information that we need. So you can go to the next slide, please, and I'll pass it to Marcella.
Thank you. So here we are at Gather. So Jamie mentioned we're talking about gathering the information that you need. So as a home visitor, you're talking and you talk about the values as a tool to engage families. This is one of the things that we use. It's one of our own tools as home visitors and as a way to get to know families and what's important to them. So check in with the survivor. Ask, what are your family values, right? Sometimes this happens in the intake process. Again, this is all in conversation. And when you think that coercion and abuse may be happening, even if it's not directly shared, think about what is the most respectful approach to engage in conversation about healthy relationships and parenting with the father, including what is spoken and unspoken cultural norms, right? We're considering as much as we can. You're also prioritizing the survivor's comfort and safety, and you're prioritizing your ongoing home visiting relationship. Ask the survivor, who are your supportive people? Who do you talk to? Who's in your circle? Who do you trust when things get overwhelming? Who's your person or who are your people? Do you have someone, someplace in the community or a person that you can reach out to if needed? Be prepared to think of ideas to build supportive community together. If they're isolated, they may not have a network of people, which is also something that's important to know. You, the home visitor, you may be the only person to build the connection to another supportive network or to provide a warm referral to another human connection, right? We're talking about care overall. You're sharing with the survivor the questions and the approach that you plan to use with the father. So there should be no surprises to the survivor about what you're going to talk to or some of the questions that you're thinking about. You're going to talk about, what are you planning to ask? What are you planning to talk about? You're going to tell them clearly what you plan to say, because again, there should be no surprises for the survivor. For example, do you feel comfortable with me asking your partner what a healthy relationship with a parent looks like? This question helps encourage reflection and what he may have experienced growing up. So it gets to a lot of things, but you're asking these questions in a respectful way. Explain that this conversation, it can open up difficult experiences. It can bring up difficult feelings and create space for the survivor to consider the impact of such sensitive questions taking place. So again, this could be where the pause comes in again, right? To think about, to really let people process. The survivor's experience and the comfort level is always at the forefront, and it can change from day to day. So things may change from day to day, and that's okay. The survivor asked them also to consider how the father interacts with the children and what impact this conversation may make. If there's any hesitation, which you will hear, you've heard us say this already, and you're going to hear it again throughout our time together. If there's any hesitation or concern from the survivor, don't move forward with the conversation. We're going to go back to Florida.
When we are building the relationship, we want to learn what makes things difficult. Listen to understand. Some families are direct about their needs, and other families may share situations, which give us a sense of the relationship's dynamics. We all have our way of asking the family, how are things going, and listening to understand what is coming up for the family. Maybe you're observing and noticing she might feel tired today because he kept her up all night arguing, knowing she still had to get the children up and ready for the morning, feed them, had a very stressful night and a very workful morning. She still tried to do everything and carrying the residue of what happened last night. How can you support? Take time to just listen. Are there specific issues impacting a father that the survivor can share? What is the need and what can help the family be in a better place? Maybe you have resources you would share with the family. It's the small things that can help relieve stress that lead up to actions that cause harm. So discuss with the survivor things that might be a need that you may have access to. Maybe there's some food disparity and that's causing issues. Um, Ask about what other support areas of support they have. Maybe they have a church that they go to, a faith-based group where they can get support or build outside relationships. Maybe it's jobs. Maybe their spouse or themselves are looking for jobs or opportunity to get better education so that they can move forward to support their families. Housing could be an issue. That's been an issue for our communities for a very long time. What resources are out there that you can share with them to support? And then also knowing where your DV and your advocacy programs are so you can share those resources. When you share those resources, you want to be very delicate how you give that information to them just to make sure that it's still within a safe space. Talk with the survivors and ask them directly, is your partner ready to engage in conversation? That is very important because even if it's something that they want, does their partner want it? And will it be safe for you after the conversation? You want to ask them. Do they have any concerns for their safety after you leave the home? These are just some few tips that you can take with you. And let's go to the next slide and we'll pass it to Jamie.
So the next step is to dive deeper into planning and really assessing what her needs are, what the father's readiness level is, and just getting more prepared to embark on this conversation. So it's okay to ask the survivor questions like, do you have any concerns about this conversation disrupting your relationship? Um, think about you as the home visitor and the survivor. What's being shared? Is the survivor really just opening up and talking to you because they need someone to listen, but they're not actually inviting you to take any actions? It's really important to be clear on what the survivor is asking you as the home visitor to do. Are they asking you to talk to their partner, or are they asking for a resource for their father, for the father? Are they asking for help to connect with another trusted community member or organization who would be a better fit to have the conversation with the father? And asking the survivor, does your partner have a supportive person or someone who he listens to or someone who he respects to reflect or debrief with after this conversation happens? And again, are you actually comfortable encouraging him to connect with that support person? Is that safe for the survivor to do? We really want to inquire about the father's ability to explore his relationship and parenting. And more questions that we can ask the survivor is like, is he open to change? Is healthy parenting or healthy relationships something that they've talked about before as a couple? And if they have had this conversation before, what approaches are successful from the survivor's point of view when engaging in conversations like these with him? Is the father able to have uncomfortable conversations? How does he respond to uncomfortable conversations? Has he demonstrated the ability to be open and accountable for his harmful behavior? It's very important to listen to understand what the survivor's safer planning approaches are when there's a difficult conversation with the father. And it's important to also ask if the family would be open to any additional services for support outside of what we as home visitors can provide. You know, specifically thinking about therapy or again, support groups. Is that something that the family is open to? And you may decide not to go further with a conversation with the father based on what you learned from the survivor. And that's okay. Consider the stressors and the emotional well-being of what's happening in real time in the household. This may not be the best time. If the survivor shares that he tends to blame or threaten her, or blame the children or threaten the children, or anyone in response to conversations about his actions and the impact that they have, then we will not move forward with engaging this type of conversation. They're not ready. The goal is to create a space for safe and welcomed reflection. It's not our role to force a conversation on behalf of a survivor or with a father who's not ready. And if now's not the best time to engage the father in a conversation directly, we will still continue to connect with the survivor about what resources or support would be helpful for her at this time, or helpful for him, even in the household. And she will just hold connecting him to that resource as she feels comfortable. We're only proceeding with the conversation if the survivor has made it absolutely clear that it's okay for us to talk with her partner. And we're going to follow the survivor's lead every step of the way, which is really the key to opening the door to this conversation. Next slide, please. All right. So after we are prepared ourselves as home visitors, we have had a clear conversation with the survivor and determined with her lead that we have a clear go-ahead to move forward with the conversation with the father. Then it's time to plan for what happens during the conversation. And so during that conversation, we'll talk more about the timing, some parenting questions, relationship questions, and respecting boundaries while we remain open to having this conversation. And I'm going to pass it back to Florida.
Thank you, Jamie.
Next slide.
Timing is everything. Remember, you can't do anything without keeping the survivor a part of the process. They will be the lead when it comes to the timing for this conversation. You may have planned a day for the conversation, but the survivor may decide it's no longer a good time. Be flexible and open to follow their lead. Think of timing from a different perspective. When to have the conversation? It is easier to plan for the morning, afternoon, evening visit or align with this schedule. Where to have the conversation? Would it be best to meet in their home or to meet in a neutral place or through the Zoom? Remembering that you should be very cautious of your surroundings. During the conversation, will things shift in their child is awake, taking a nap, going to, they need to tend to their children. So be able to make those shifts when it's necessary. And are there other considerations? The subject matter shifts during the conversation. Can you pivot quickly? If it's time to change the conversation, are you willing to let it go and move on with something else? Stay observant and cautious in noticing changes. Maybe they're still going on with the conversation because you're still engaging in that particular conversation, but you can tell by the way they're breathing, the pitch of their voice, something is changing. So just be aware of their body mechanics and how their energy is coming off, so that if you need to stop the conversation because it makes it better for the survivor, then you also can stop it. All indications of how someone may be feeling can come through how they sound, how they move, how they look, and just the change of the conversation. And I'll pass it to Marcella.
Thank you. If you notice any changes, and Florida just gave us some really great examples of things that may cause those changes. If you notice any changes, bring the conversation back to a safer, neutral topic, right? Just shift the conversation. Be flexible and remember things change because in life they always do and they always will. So in this case, they probably will change. You don't want to end the conversation abruptly because that can cause harm to the survivor or the children after you leave. So you're using your skills that you have as a home visitor to check the conversation and to bring it back to a neutral and safer place. We're going to assume that the time is right and that the conversation is happening. And so we're going to shift into sharing some examples of parenting questions that you could use, adapt, put into your own words. But at this point, we're going to transition to parenting questions with Jamie. And next slide, please.
Right. Thank you, Marcella. So let's dive into these parenting questions. And keep in mind, you may be talking to the father with the survivor present. Most home visitors will be talking to the father with the survivor present and having a conversation with the two of them together. And in some cases, you may also be talking to the father alone. So you may need to circle back to the survivor and share what comes up for him during that conversation. But some of the questions that you might want to ask are just, what kind of parent do you want to be? What's important to you? And thinking about their own childhood, is there anything that you would want to do differently from your parents now that you have a child? Also considering what the closeness of their relationship is. Like, do you feel close to your children? How do you have fun with your children? How do you all have fun together? Really think about what questions would help create a space for reflection between the father and survivor. And we know that these can be hard questions for some families, but hopefully you'll hear the father start to share his own experiences and ideas about parenting. And we recognize, of course, that some questions won't work for every family. As a home visitor, your role is to recognize that the father is considering his own parenting experiences, his current approach to parenting, and we really want to acknowledge when we witness him expressing openness to doing things differently. As a home visitor, we are always looking for the positive aspects of how families interact and engage with their children. So, just the same, we really want to focus in on the recognition of the things that he does well, and humor and joy are welcomed, right? This is a conversation that we really want to create enough spaciousness for reflection, and it doesn't have to be a focus on just the harder pieces or difficulties we're encouraging as well. And we want to focus the conversation on what they want in their relationship with their children and their partner or co-parent. So we're inviting them to reflect on parenthood as they experienced it and on how they parent their children now. Another question that you might want to ask is something like, what's an experience that you had growing up that was really important to you? And how now do you want to incorporate that for your children as a parent? And if you can create an opening to reflect on their behavior and what they can do for their children, the importance of their well-being and the impact that has on their children and their partner or their co-parent, then you really have successfully created that reflective space. Home visitors are good at going beyond just basic questions and are skilled at getting people to consider things from a different perspective. You're setting up a broader vision that hopefully he'll be able to come back to on his own time. And just remember that asking a simple question can truly be life altering. And something that we know really will come up around parenting is the concept of respect. And we want to acknowledge that that concept really is rooted in cultural experiences. There may be different ideas of what respect means, of what respect looks like, and how respect is demonstrated or expected to be demonstrated. And often the concept is tied to behavior, to obedience, and to discipline. And we also then understand that this means that the idea of respect can be tied to corporal discipline, and that the parent may have been physically disciplined as a child, And if the father's open to exploring this conversation deeper, it can provide an opportunity for him to examine if there were times that physical discipline could have been handled a different way. And the goal is really to invite a conversation about respect that includes other aspects beyond discipline, like care, affection, patience, love, empathy, and compassion. Again, this can be a very sensitive topic. Remember to stay open in pivots in conversation, be observant of the survivor and of the father's comfort level. And it's always okay to move the conversation back to a more neutral place. Next, we'll talk more about some of the relationship questions that you might want to ask. And again, we want to acknowledge that many home visitors are having these conversations in real time with parents who are still actively in a relationship together. So it's important to center the survivor's safety and well-being as you're considering engaging in the conversation about healthy relationships. So let's go to the next slide and I'll pass it to Marcella.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, so you've been through the parenting questions. And so now we're at the relationship questions. So when you're in conversation, really listen for and lead with some of the things that you'll hear next. You can lead with a compliment or something positive that the partner has done. So you're looking for opportunities that could be an opening to ask some of the questions that you see listed here on the screen. And please remember that this is not excusing the father's controlling or coercive behavior. Again, this is a tool to get to some of those questions, right? So that you can have the conversation about healthy relationships or healthier relationships. Again, this is not about imposing your opinions about the adult's relationships in your overall relationship with the survivor. You're calling out things that you want to see more of. We're talking about a strength-based approach. So you're reflecting about the positive strengths, you're reflecting about positive actions, small and big. So we're listening for what's working, right? Every relationship, as you all know, is complicated. So both negative and positive exist within the same relationship. Our goal is to focus on engaging in conversation about healthy relationship dynamics. You could ask, what do you like about your relationship? People wonder, why would you like anything about them? And that's a very natural response. It's a completely normal response. The partner or the survivor will share both positives and negatives. The father may share both positives and negatives. Someone may say, the survivor may say, he's really good at remembering dates, but I'm not happy about how he roughhouses with my babies. He may be a good provider, but he's limiting your access to some things, like maybe it's a computer. We're going to hear from Florida next.
Like Marcella said, we wonder, we wonder, we wonder. There's always a wonder and a why. Why might we wonder? Why even ask these questions? Survivors have a complex view of their partners. They see negatives and they see positives. The conversation you are having provides an opportunity for them to share their perspective and explore their relationship. Asking questions allows for room for feedback and that you get a better understanding the relationship dynamics. We're not going to just focus on areas that are challenging, but acknowledge the positives they've experienced in their relationship shows your investment in their family as a whole. Not focusing solely on the areas they need improvement and support helps build that trusting relationship that you want to create so that they will feel like it's a safe space to have those harder conversations with you, because they know that you're not just looking for the negative stuff about their spouse or partner. If a survivor is sharing with you, you want to be careful about talking negatively about their partner. This can interrupt you building a healthy relationship yourself with them. If there are points of sensitivity, it's important to acknowledge boundaries, because boundaries are very important. Next slide. And Marcella, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about boundaries. Let's talk about respecting boundaries. So we're going to wait until the conversation, or wait until the survivor or the partners signals that they're ready to continue the conversation. This is really key. Please remember that this can be someone actually says the words to you, they're using gestures or actions. So we're thinking about verbal and nonverbal communication as we think about this. It's really about respecting their space while staying open to conversation. And again, as home visitors, you do this all the time already. This is one of the skills that you already have as a home visitor. So we're listening for cues. So maybe someone is going to ask a follow-up question or expressed interest in continuing. So we're listening for something like that. We're not pushing too soon. You heard about timing earlier. We're considering timing again. We're giving time for reflection before jumping back in. Silence is okay. Silence is really okay. We're being open and present. You're responding thoughtfully rather than rushing to fill that silence that may be happening during the reflection. Again, it's a moment of pause, which is a good thing. We're going to hear from Florida next.
So
I can jump in
Marcella,
for
if you
Florida.
could- thank you.
Okay. So we really also want to respect the survivor or the father really may not want our help. And if at any time the survivor chooses to stop the conversation or to stop the process, then the process stops. The partner might be willing to embark on the conversation and then might signal that it's time to stop, that they've reached a wall. And something could change, and the partner might decide that they're not ready to actually share or be vulnerable in the space with you. And that's okay. Beware of any context changes or shifts in the level of comfort by either the survivor or the father. If there's any sign of distress or clear demonstration that the conversation is coming to a hard place or causing harm, then it's time to stop. And again, it's always okay to take a break. It's okay to pause and come back. It's always okay to stop. And as we talked about earlier, shifting to a neutral zone, finding a way to move the conversation away is always something that we can do as a home visitor. It's important to keep the conversation clear and short and recognize also when the conversation is winding down. As home visitors with the families we work with, it's important for us to respect their journey. It is their journey with their partner, with their children. It's not ours. So let's talk more about what happens after the conversation has concluded. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so you have done it. You've had the conversation with the father, and now we're going to talk about what happens next. We will need time to reflect and to practice. We'll need self-care and some follow-up. So on to the next slide, please, and we'll talk about reflect and practice. So first, it's important to take time to reset. It's, as we started out talking about, it's really important to have a support team. And if you're working with another advocate, if you're working with your supervisor in your home visitor program, even reaching out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline or emailing Whiskative, it's important to have another support person on your team who you are able to debrief these conversations with. And we know that any resources or tools that are gathered, we often share those with the survivor. And we're including the father in the home visits because this tool is all of the home visiting tools that we use are important for all of the parents that we're working with, right? Those tools are perfectly fine to share. We also want to include resources for the father. So, what are some resources that might be specific to him as he is navigating relationships and things that may come up? And we really want to think ahead about these resources and have them ready to go, like we had talked about in the beginning. That will be helpful preparation for us and for the families to have those relationship information, resource information on hand in the beginning. We know that the conversations may pause, and that's okay. We know that we might leave the conversation and we might not fully feel okay, and that's okay. It's at that point time to think about our own recovery and well-being. Think about what makes you feel better. What are things that you do as a home visitor to fill your cup after having had a hard day, a hard conversation, or even as we're thinking about what comes up for our families and that weight that we carry with the concern and the care that we have for the families we're working with. We know that these conversations are sensitive and they shouldn't be shared outside. We work in small communities. Oftentimes, we have families engaged who know each other with limited resources. There's a lot of overlap. So it's very important to keep the privacy and confidentiality of the family as we are thinking about what comes next for the resources that we share with them, and also the ways that we are doing our own self-care and debriefing with other community folks. And I'm going to pass it on to Marcella.
Okay,
Next slide.
thank you. Okay, so we're back to you specifically as the home visitor. We're talking to you when we say this. Self-care is essential. Your self-care is essential. As home visitors, you know that you are, a lot of times you're really aware of how, when you're working with families who are experiencing trauma, sharing past traumas, you're aware of how that impacts you. So we're talking about secondary trauma. It's hard to not take some of these things on, right, as a home visitor. So please remember that boundaries are for you. They're not for anybody else. They're for you. Set clear boundaries for yourself with the families who you work with and hold firm to them. It's difficult, but hold firm to them. Even if you want to do more because you're home visitors, you're going to want to do more. But please remember that the boundaries are for you. And again, self-care is essential. Your self-care is essential. You're a support role. You do this for a reason. You do this because you're a caring person. But remember, please pour into yourself. So you care about what happens, and it's easy for these boundaries to become blurred, but hold firm. Healthy relationships are important, especially the one with you, especially the one with yourself. These are not easy conversations, and your peace also matters. Do you know where to get support for yourself as well as the survivor? Especially if the survivor only wants to talk to you and not somebody else, like a counselor or another potential service. Having a supportive supervisor or peer is really important, and making sure that you schedule time with them to debrief, to reflect, to get guidance, that will all make a difference for you in this overall situation and process. I heard somebody say, be careful about not storing someone else's trauma. And that's really what it is, right? We're, again, for the third time, self-care is really essential, and your self-care is really essential. So we're going to hear from Jamie again. And next slide, please.
Thank you, Marcella. So these conversations that we have with the father has opened the door for the survivor and father who has caused harm to engage in conversation about their parenting, about their relationship, and how they want things to be for their children. We framed these conversations with a focus on the family's values and engaged fathers, inviting them to reflect and acknowledge their strengths as parents, new ways to engage with their children, what healthy relationships look like, new areas of growth in their parenting or in their relationship, and hopes for their children and themselves as they're going forward into the future. And there are multiple resources that you can share with a family during or after these conversations, or that you can use to help guide these conversations. And we'll follow up with an email with resources after the presentation. And you could always share other supportive resources that are centered in your community for fathers or families together that are focused on healthy relationships, that are focused on mental health and wellness, or that are focused on early childhood and mental health. So watch for a handout of resources to get started as you might be thinking about what resources you would want to have on hand for families. As a home visitor, the relationship that you build over time with the family is what will endure. We focus on the parallel process, providing parents with respect and kindness and thoughtfulness, and we're honoring the trust that the family has with us as home visitors. And that's really what matters. Trust is built in the parallel process that you model and in the positive reflections that you leave. This is what families can continue to build on even after your time working with them ends. And we have made it to the end of our presentation. So we'll have some time for questions. And feel free to, maybe we might want to keep the slide up if folks want info off of the slide while we're answering questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jamie. We do have like one more slide after the question section. And I noticed because Jesse and I are both sharing slides, we can't actually see the chat from everyone. We see the chat between, we learned a new thing, y'all. We see the chat between panelists, and I see someone has their hand raised. So I don't know if you have a lot of questions waiting for you, or I can see the time for sure. I see 2 participants' hands are raised. So maybe, I don't see if you can unmute people or, whoops, sorry, went to click the wrong screen, back at follow-up. Can any of you trainers see?
I can see 2 raised hands. And
Great.
yes, so
Can you unmute them, Jamie, or
I cannot unmute them, but I can invite them maybe to unmute if they'd like to ask a question. I don't know the webinar format, so they may have to type it in the chat, or if they're able to come off mute, we can welcome them to.
So please, the folks who have questions, if you want to put a version, I can see Q&A, which is different from chat. But if there's someone who wants to drop a question into the chat of the people who raise their hands, we'd love to hear it. Let's see. Don't be shy. All right, they're being shy. See any questions, Marcella, Jamie, or Florida?
I don't.
Wait, I see one in the Q&A. Here we go. Here is a question. Is there a resource for providers that are in need of consultation for cases? That was in the Q&A.
Great. And thank you, Nathan. I see your comment. I don't believe there is a way to unmute in the webinar format. I don't think so either. I think Q&A or chat is the only way we can see your questions. As far as consultation goes, we definitely recommend having this conversation with your local DV agency or advocacy touch point. They're a great place to start to have these conversations and to plan and prepare for a conversation that you're hoping to engage. Advocates there will be knowledgeable about resources in your area and can also have conversations about safer planning, safety planning with a survivor who you are working with and whose partner or co-parent that you would like to engage. Do you have other thoughts about that, Lee?
Thank you. Yes, I found that I can actually, I think that's a great suggestion, Jamie. If you have a relationship with the local advocacy program, to reach out. I'm going to put our WISCATIV website in the chat right now where you can find a local program, but actually you can call any program. They're not zip code dependent. Again, you may have, it's an interesting question to bring up at, you know, the ways you all gather. If you have coworkers who've, or peers or trusted supervisors actually had experience supporting families who are experiencing coercion and abuse. Okay, so I now can see everyone's chat. That's wonderful. So here's another question for you all. Have you ever had to deal, this is from Sheila, have you ever had to deal with a confrontation in a meeting and how best to handle?
I can speak to a confrontation that I experienced at what would have been a more sensitive space, which was a birth space. And the approach that I took in that space was to center the birthing experience that was happening in the moment and to really engage in conversation around what we wanted for the baby to experience and what we wanted and needed for mama to be safe, to have a calm space, in a calm delivery and the healthiest possible delivery. And ultimately, um, we did have the conversation about just, I was able to ask dad what it is that he really hoped for. And clearly he wanted for, there to be a beautiful birth, a safe space, and a calm space. And so it really helped to reset the experience that we were having in a heightened moment in the room. And I had a lot of opportunities to invite people to consider what they think was best for the baby and focusing on the healthy experience for the baby and the best moment for the baby really shifted the dynamic. So that can be used in another home visiting experience, in any home visiting experience.
Didn't know if Florida Marcella wanted to add to that, or there's one there is another question.
I see that Nathan put in the chat that he would love to hear a personal reflection on a conversation. I can share one that happened. I was in a home visit with a mom, and dad happened to be there, and he noticed that his child was throwing toys. And some of this is developmentally. We know that a 2-year-old is going to throw some things sometimes. But he was throwing things, and sometimes he was aiming them in the direction of mom. And so the father, he didn't say anything at first, and then he got really, really, really quiet, more quiet, and just noticed his body language changed. And I asked him if he was okay. And in that moment, he said that he realized that his child was reflecting some of the behaviors that he was some of the things that he was doing, right? With mom and in the presence of mom. And that for him was a moment. And so we sat in that moment, and he actually started to cry because he realized that his behavior was impacting his child's behavior. And then we had just a moment of, okay, so what does this look like for you? You've had this moment, you've seen this. what would you like to do moving forward? How would you like to move forward? And we were actually able to have that conversation with mom sitting there too, with dad sitting there, and with the child. And from then on, the dad he made sure to be in any visit that he could be in, because he realized that the home visit was an opportunity for him to relearn some things too. So that was an experience that that I had with home visiting.
Thank you for your comments, Nathan. Lord, I see you're unmuted. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything.
I just think in the end, just to remember that when you're in those moments, that it's not something that you take on as personal to you. And sometimes they just need space to vent. Sometimes, you, even though it's an area you may not want to be in, you might be the safe person that they can vent and get stuff off their chest. So just remember not to take it personal. If your safety is a concern, then you adjust how you keep yourself safe. But sometimes it could just be a venting moment, and then you'll be able to reflect. And also, like Jamie and Marcella said, pivot the conversation to the strengths that they have and turn it into something positive if that's possible.
Well, we're getting close to our end. I don't know if Jamie, not Jamie, excuse me, Jesse, I see that I can post things in the everyone chat. I didn't know if you were able to post the link in the chat for the actual hard copies of the slides.
If I was able to?
Yes,
No, I still
not yet.
don't have access to message everybody.
Okay, so I see the time where I think right at the end, I'm going to go off share after we do our last slide and see if we can post it in. So I'm going to go to the next slide, the summary slide, and turn it back to Jamie.
Thank you, Lee. So just remember that by creating the space for survivor-led conversations, this means that you as a home visitor, you're listening in a different way and you're building trust with the family. If you've been invited to have a conversation, that matters. That is demonstrating the trust that they have for you. And a reminder that we are not there to impose an agenda. We know, from our vantage point that we might have a strong want or hope for a family that ultimately may not be what they want for themselves or for their children. And we are really going to hold what we leave with the family after our relationship ends and think about what we're leaving behind with the family. As long as we hold clarity about our role as a home visitor in the space, then we're still able to move forward in relationship with the survivor and with the family. And remember that small changes matter and really do make a difference. And I'll pass it to you, Marcella.
Thank you, Jamie. Supporting families with this conversation means recognizing that healthy looks different for everyone. Just like in the beginning, the door may be different. So individual families, their version of healthy or healthier, it looks different for everyone. So this is not a one size fits all situation. And whatever a healthier relationship looks like for the family is part of the support you offer. So again, this is happening in conversation. Part of the conversation is also asking directly, what does healthier mean to you, to your partner, to your family? So there's levels to this, right? But this conversation has happened because mom has said something that lets you know that it's okay to have the conversation about healthier and healthier. We're encouraging open dialogue because that helps the survivor and partner define what this healthier relationship means for them together as individuals and for their whole family. So I will pass it to Florida.
Thank you, Marcella. You may have the greatest intentions in the world, but remember this journey belongs to the survivor. They are the driver, and you can support with the navigation. It is important that you do not assume you can fix it and always get permission to move forward on any conversation you may have with the father or the survivor. Remember, before you start the conversation, make sure all parties are ready. It is always okay to pause or even stop if moving forward can cause harm. Gathering information is ongoing because things can change. Assess what is happening in real time. Be aware of timing. It is okay to ask questions, but remember to respect the boundaries. And remember to take care of yourself and be mindful of what you also bring to the relationship. Remember, survivors have been surviving and will continue to survive long after you're gone. Lee, Jesse, can you stop sharing slides? And we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We greatly appreciate having you and spending your time with us.
We had one more conversation or one more question in the chat about the inverse of the situation. I'm not sure if that question was specifically asking if we have a mom in the situation who is causing harm or showing coercive or manipulative behaviors towards a father in a home visiting relationship. And while this does focus on fathers, I'd like to invite you to consider, is it possible to utilize any of the same tools that we just discussed to have this conversation with this other parent? Is it possible also that this is a really complicated relationship, like we spoke to in the beginning, that there's coercion and harm that's happening, but there's also someone who holds the majority of the power and control? And is this a dynamic of them going back and forth, but one person clearly holding power? It's definitely very complicated. And as we shared, that this is just an opportunity to briefly touch on considerations of what these conversations can look like. And we know relationships are very complex. And so we really want to honor the individual home visiting relationship that you may be referring to or experiencing or seeing. But if you'd like to have, the opportunity to ask more questions, there will be a follow-up email. You can always circle back and we can certainly point you in the right direction for additional resources if that would be helpful.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you, Marcella, Florida, and Jamie. Thank you, Jesse, for helping. Thank you, interpreters. We did seem to get able to get the link into the chat. If anyone wants to order hard copies of those form, it really is just how many do you want and where can they go? So it really is easy. And we will follow up with separate emails around the training certificate, evaluation, and more resources. And we will let all the attendees know when this live PDF of these slides will be online. The tool will be online, as well as we're going to also house the training on our website as well. So thank you again. This was a fabulous conversation. I learned so much. I know we all did. I really appreciate the comments people are putting in the chat. And I hope everyone has a beautiful weekend. And, reach out, any questions, we can always, my email, I'll just put mine in. We're all first names at the coalition. But I can also help connect people or support connection to advocacy resources as well, domestic violence advocacy resources, because we all really care about the families that we walk alongside. So, any last words?
Get some sun.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, it's 11:32. Let's see, there was one last question. No, thank you. It's a thank you. Great. So I'm going to say thank you to our interpreters. Oh, I see Sorel and Luce were here. Good. So glad you were here with us. Thank you.
We miss you, Luz.
And thank you to Jesse for helping me.
I saw Janet in there too. Shout
I
out to
know I
Oh,
wasn't
Janet. Awesome. Did you see Janet? Yay.
There's Sorrel.
Oh, yay. Sorel. I couldn't see all the everyone's till the very end for some reason, so it's great to see familiar names. Okay, people are winding out. I think we can stop the recording. I'm not sure how. Ah, stop. There you go. Yes.